I can still hear the ring of my phone that night. It wasn't just sound. It was an intrusion, like glass breaking in a quiet room. I was sitting alone in my car, parked across from the bank, headlights off, staring at my reflection in the dark windshield. The city had mostly gone to sleep, but inside me, something was pacing like a caged animal. I almost didn't pick up. My thumb hovered above the screen, Marcus's name glowing. When I answered, his voice didn't sound like his. It trembled, yet was sharp, like a knife forced against stone. "Daniel, what the hell did you do?" For a moment, I thought he was joking, some late-night prank. But then I heard the weight in his breathing, the fury just barely contained. "What are you talking about?" I asked. My voice cracked. "The loan," he spat. "The money I trusted you with. It's gone. All of it. I've got your signature on the withdrawal forms. Your damn name, Daniel." My chest went cold. I leaned forward, forehead pressing against the steering wheel, trying to understand words that didn't make sense. "Marcus, no, I didn't touch it. I swear to you, I never touched your money." He laughed, but it was hollow, bitter. "Then explain this. The papers don't lie." I swallowed, my throat dry as ash. There has to be some mistake. And then he said it, the words that turned my world into rubble. It was her, wasn't it? Elena. Her name fell heavy, echoing between us. For a moment I couldn't breathe. He continued, his tone lower, broken. "She signed it in your name. You do understand what that means, don't you? My life, my trust, it's all tied to you. And you let her burn it down." I didn't answer, because in that silence I knew he was right. Images flooded my mind like a cruel slideshow. Eleanor leaning against the doorway in her silk robe, the faint trace of her perfume lingering long after she walked by, the way she'd smiled, when she wanted to distract me from asking questions. 100 small lies I'd brushed off, 1,000 moments when I convinced myself she loved me, that her sharp edges were just part of her charm. And now, here I was, with my best friend's rage in my ear, my wife's betrayal pounding in my chest, and a signature I didn't write, staring at me from a bank's records. "Marcus," I whispered, "I didn't know. I swear on my life I didn't know." His silence on the line was worse than his anger. Then he said coldly, "Knowing or not, it doesn't matter. The loan's gone. My trust is gone. And you're ruined." The call ended, just like that. I stayed frozen, phone still pressed against my ear even after the screen went black. The silence around me became unbearable. The ticking of the car's clock grew louder, each second mocking me. I stared at my hands gripping the steering wheel. They shook violently, as if they didn't belong to me anymore. My reflection in the glass looked older, broken, the man I thought I was already fading. A memory surfaced. Elena's voice one morning, teasing me as she adjusted my tie. "You worry too much, Daniel. Let me take care of things sometimes." At the time, it felt like love. Now it sounded like foreshadowing. I wanted to scream, to drive straight home, confront her, demand answers. But I couldn't move. I sat in that car, under the harsh glow of a single street lamp, trying to piece together a puzzle I never thought I'd have to solve. The betrayal wasn't just romantic. It was financial, personal, surgical. She hadn't only taken Marcus's trust, she had poisoned mine. And in doing so, she'd taken my name, my identity, and dragged them through the mud. A wedding ring glinted on my finger as I tightened my grip on the wheel. It felt heavier than it ever had, like a shackle instead of a symbol. I thought about sliding it off, throwing it against the dashboard, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I sat there, my heart pounding in my ears, staring at the empty street, replaying Marcus's words over and over. It was her, wasn't it? She stole it, but it was your name on the line. The line, my line. The fragile thread my whole life balanced on had just been cut, and I was free-falling into something dark and endless. I turned the key and let the engine hum to life. But I didn't drive. I just sat with it, the vibration running through my bones. I wanted the sound, the noise, anything to keep me from collapsing into the silence. When I finally looked at myself again in the glass, I didn't recognize the man staring back. His eyes weren't mine. They were hollow, wide, as if they had just witnessed a crime. Maybe they had. Maybe I had just realized the crime was my own life, stolen from under me while I wasn't watching. That night, I understood something I never wanted to admit. The person who could destroy you the most is the one who knows where you hide your strength. Eleanor had known mine, and she'd turned it against me. And as I sat there, knuckles white on the steering wheel, lungs locked tight, I knew this was only the beginning. I used to believe that every great love story began with timing, that two people found each other at the exact moment they were meant to, and from there, the rest was fate. Looking back now, I know that timing can be a trickster. It can place someone in your life at the moment when you're most vulnerable, most eager to believe, and call it destiny. That's how it was with Eleanor. I met her at a gallery opening I hadn't even wanted to attend. Marcus had dragged me there. He'd been dating a woman who loved modern art, and he didn't want to go alone. I remember the place smelled of varnish and cheap champagne, with abstract canvases hanging like riddles on the walls. And then Eleanor appeared, like she'd been painted into the room herself. Black dress, red lipstick, hair pinned in a careless bun that looked effortless but must have taken her an hour. She had that kind of press that shifted the gravity in a space. When she laughed, heads turned. When her eyes found mine, it felt less like chance and more like design. "Daniel, right?" she said, walking straight toward me, glass in hand. "Marcus talks about you all the time. Best friend, childhood, cars and loyalty. I had to see what all the fuss was about." She was bold, direct, the kind of woman who didn't wait to be introduced. She introduced herself. I should have seen it then, the way she studied me as she spoke, like she was already measuring what I could give her. But I didn't. I only saw a woman who made my quiet world suddenly feel electric. We talked the rest of the night. I barely noticed Marcus and his date slip away. By the time I walked her to her car, I was already imagining a future that hadn't existed hours before. 2 months later, she was living with me. 6 months after that, we were married. Marcus pulled me aside the night before the wedding, tie hanging loose, his expression heavy. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. I laughed then, brushing him off. "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" "Because it's fast," he said. "Too fast. And she—" He stopped himself, sighed. "Just be careful. You've got a good heart. Don't hand it over to someone who doesn't know how to hold it." I wish I had listened. But love, or what I thought was love, makes warnings sound like envy. The wedding itself was beautiful in the way all weddings are, even if the details now feel like a cruel joke. Elena insisted on an outdoor ceremony in the late afternoon, golden light spilling over everything like honey. I remember sliding the ring on her finger, my hands trembling, and feeling the weight of her ring on mine. Back then, it felt like an anchor. Now, that same ring feels more like a chain I forged myself. For a while, things were good, or at least good enough to blind me. She filled that, a house with life, laughter, perfume. She loved expensive candles, the kind that smelled of sandalwood and vanilla, and she'd burn them even on ordinary Tuesday nights. "Because we deserve it," she'd say. I worked longer hours to make sure we did deserve it. I told myself her taste for luxury was motivation, proof that I could provide. I didn't notice how the small requests became larger ones. How, let's go out tonight became, why don't we book a trip? And how, just a new dress became, I need this because everyone else has it. The first real fight we had was about money. I came home one night to find a new designer bag sitting on the couch, tags still on. When I asked her about it, she smiled, kissed my cheek and said, "Don't be so serious, Daniel. It's just money. You'll make more." I should have pushed back harder. Instead, I let it slide. Because when she leaned into me, smelling of that perfume I'd come to associate with comfort, I didn't want to ruin the moment. That's the trick of it. Manipulation doesn't always feel like force. Sometimes it feels like surrendering because you want to keep the peace. Marcus saw it, though. He'd joke sometimes, lightly but pointedly. "You work more now than you did before marriage. Shouldn't it be the other way around?" I'd laugh it off, but I knew what he was getting at. Elena didn't like him. She told me once, flat out, that she thought Marcus resented her. "He's always watching me," she said, folding laundry in the bedroom. "It's like he's waiting for me to slip up. Honestly, Daniel, it makes me uncomfortable. You should spend less time with him." And like a fool, I listened. I let the distance grow between Marcus and me, all because she convinced me his loyalty was suspicion. I think about that now. How she isolated me without ever raising her voice. How she framed concern as criticism. How she painted loyalty as jealousy. She knew exactly how to twist the knife without me realizing I was bleeding. Still, I loved her. Or maybe I loved who I thought she was. Nights when she curled into me, whispering about the future, about children, about the house we'd build, I believed her. I believed that the sacrifices were worth it, that the doubts in my gut were just fear. And so, I worked harder. I traded nights with friends for nights in the office. I skipped vacations to pay down debts that weren't mine. I convinced myself I was building something solid, something lasting. But if I'm honest, there were moments, even then, that cracked the illusion. The time I found messages on her phone, flirty but harmless, she said. The unexplained absences, the vague excuses, the way she always managed to turn any confrontation back on me. "You're paranoid. You don't trust me. Maybe you're the one with secrets." I should have left. God knows I had enough reasons. But leaving her felt like admitting failure, like undoing every dream I'd sold myself. And so, I stayed. That's the thing about love when it goes wrong. It doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes, slowly, like water against stone, until one day you realize the shape of your life is unrecognizable. Now, when I walk through the rooms of our house in memory, I see ghosts. The perfume lingering in the hallway, the candles half burned on the counter, the photos on the mantel where we smiled like a perfect couple. Symbols of a life that was never truly ours, just mine, poured into her hands until I had nothing left. And Marcus? He was right all along. His warnings weren't jealousy. They were love, the kind of love a friend gives when he sees you heading toward a cliff. But I was too blinded, too arrogant to recognize it. The irony cuts deep now. Eleanor always said Marcus didn't respect her. In truth, she feared him, because he saw her clearly, and she knew that one day that clarity would reach me too. I just never imagined it would come in the form of a phone call, with my best friend's voice breaking, and my wife's betrayal written in ink beside my name. I used to think betrayal would come like lightning, sudden, sharp, impossible to miss. But mine seeped in like water through a crack in the ceiling, silent and relentless, until one day the whole roof gave way and I was standing in ruins, asking myself how I never noticed the rot spreading above my head. The first clue came in a phone call from the bank. A woman's voice, professional, clipped, rehearsed, asking me to confirm the additional withdrawal. I remember the sound of my own voice, polite at first, then hollow, asking her to repeat herself. She spoke of a loan under my name. Numbers rolled off her tongue, cold and final. $50,000, interest compounding, paperwork filed and signed. My paperwork, my signature. I told her there must be a mistake. She promised to email me the documents. I hung up and sat at my desk, staring at the half-finished sketch I'd been working on, the pencil suddenly foreign in my hand. My heart beat slow, then fast, then not at all. When the email arrived, I opened the attachment, and there it was. My name, my handwriting, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. It was hers. Amelia, I don't remember standing. I don't remember knocking over the chair. But I remember the sting in my throat, the way bile rose until I could taste metal. My wife hadn't just lied. She had stolen my hand, my name, my very identity. And for what? The answer came hours later, when I cornered her in the kitchen. She stood there, backlit by the glow of the oven clock, as if she had been waiting for this moment. I held the papers in my hand like a weapon. "What is this?" I demanded. She glanced at them once, barely flinched, and poured herself a glass of water. "It's handled," she said. "Handled?" My voice cracked. "You forged my signature. You put me in debt. I borrowed it for us," she interrupted. "For our future. Stop being so dramatic." Us. That word hit harder than the debt itself, because I realized she hadn't said for you. She hadn't even said for me. It was for us. The word she wielded like a shield to cover every selfish choice she'd ever made. I slammed the papers on the counter. "Tell me the truth. Where is the money?" She didn't look at me. Instead, she brushed past, heading for the hallway, her perfume trailing behind. Sweet, heavy, suffocating. I caught her wrist. "Where is it?" Her eyes flicked toward me then, sharp and cold. "Ask your best friend." The world tilted. The kitchen swam. My best friend. Daniel. He was the one who had called me months ago about a business idea. He was the one Amelia insisted we trust, insisted I loan money to. I had refused. I thought I'd been firm, but she had found another way. And suddenly it all made sense. The secretive smiles, the late-night phone calls, the excuses about errands and catching up with old friends. It wasn't just betrayal of marriage. It was betrayal of friendship. It was theft of loyalty, theft of years. I released her wrist as if it burned me. She slipped away, her footsteps echoing down the hall, leaving me alone in the kitchen with nothing but the ticking clock and the ringing in my ears. That night I sat in the dark living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. Amelia in white, me in black, Daniel standing just behind us as my best man, his hand on my shoulder. 3 smiles frozen in time, 3 lies suspended in a frame. The photo blurred, my eyes stinging, but I didn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. What came instead was silence. Thick, absolute silence. It was the sound of something breaking inside me, clean and irreparable. Days blurred into weeks. The debt collectors called. The bank demanded answers. My designs went unfinished, my clients disappeared. Friends drifted away, whispers chasing me wherever I went. But Amelia stayed. She moved through the house as if nothing had happened, laughing on the phone, scrolling through her messages, humming in the shower. Every sound she made scraped at me, pulled me deeper into a pit I didn't know how to climb out of. I began to avoid her, sleeping on the couch, eating at odd hours. Still, her presence lingered, her perfume clinging to my shirts, her hair caught in the drain. I found myself hating the walls of the house, the very furniture we had chosen together. Even the watch on my wrist, the one she had gifted me years ago, felt like a shackle. The breaking point came one evening when I overheard her on the phone. I was in the hallway, hidden by the shadows, and her voice floated from the bedroom, low but sharp. "Yes, he suspects," she whispered. A pause. "No, he won't do anything. He never does." A laugh followed. A laugh that didn't belong to the woman I thought I married. It was colder, sharper, crueler, and then she said his name. Daniel. The glass in my hand slipped and shattered on the floor. I didn't pick it up. I didn't even flinch. I just stood there, staring at the shards, and realized they were me. Broken, scattered, unrecognizable. That night I walked into the bedroom, my face pale, my voice calm. "I know," I said. Amelia looked up, annoyed, as if I had interrupted her. "Know what?" "That it was never about us. That it was about you. About him." For a moment her mask slipped. Then she laughed, soft and dismissive. "Grow up, Nathan. Stop acting like a victim." A victim. The word sliced through me, because for months I had been exactly that. Passive, stunned, waiting for the storm to pass. But storms don't pass, they destroy. And in that moment, staring at her, I knew the man I had been was gone. The husband who believed in promises, the friend who trusted too easily, the dreamer who built his life on faith. All of him was buried under the rubble. What remained was something else, something harder, something waiting. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I did, and even pack a bag. I just turned and walked out of the room, leaving her laughter behind me like the last echo of a song I no longer wanted to hear. I stepped outside, into the cold night air, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. The marriage wasn't over yet. The debt wasn't resolved. The betrayal wasn't avenged. But inside me, a seed had cracked open, and from it, something new was beginning to grow. Something stronger than her lies. Something stronger than my silence. It would take time and pain, and everything I had left. But one day, that seed would bloom into the strength I needed to face them both. And when it did, they would finally understand what it meant to take everything from me. I didn't leave that night. I couldn't. My body was still buzzing with anger, grief, and something worse, humiliation. The smell of her perfume clung to my shirt collar like a mocking hand. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to her sleep soundly beside me, as though nothing had happened, as though she hadn't set fire to the foundation of my life. When the morning came, I got up quietly, not because I didn't want to wake her, but because I didn't want her to see my face anymore. I put on my watch, my father's watch, the only thing I owned that hadn't been tainted by her fingerprints, and I walked out of the house. The door closing behind me sounded final. I didn't take much. Just a duffel bag with a few shirts, jeans, a pair of boots, my passport, and the old cologne bottle my mother had given me years ago. It was almost empty, but I brought it anyway. It was stupid, sentimental. But in that moment, I needed something that smelled like a past untouched by betrayal. I drove until the fuel light came on. No plan, no destination. Just the open road, the lines on the highway blurring into the kind of silence I'd been craving for years. The world out. Side the car looked washed out, muted. Even the sky seemed hollow, as if it understood the hollowed-out shell I had become. I ended up in a small town off the interstate, the kind of place you don't notice unless you're desperate. There was a motel, its neon sign flickering like a weak heartbeat. I checked in under my middle name, cash only. The room smelled faintly of mildew. The bed sagged in the middle, but it felt like a refuge. For the first few days I barely moved. I kept the curtains drawn and the TV on mute. I'd sit on the edge of the bed with my head in my hands, the betrayal playing in loops in my mind. Her voice, his voice, my name being used like currency. But grief is strange. It shifts. It doesn't stay raw forever. After a while, the silence became less suffocating. I started to go outside. There was a diner down the road. I'd sit at the counter every morning, drinking burnt coffee, watching the regulars laugh with the waitresses. Nobody knew me there. Nobody asked me questions. That anonymity was its own kind of medicine. One day, an older man sat down next to me. His name was Walter. He had hands that looked like they'd spent a lifetime breaking, fixing, and building things. He nodded at my watch and said, "That's a hell of a piece. You take care of it. It'll outlive you." It was the first real conversation I'd had in weeks. We talked about nothing. Weather, old cars, the way the town used to be busier when the mill was running. But it was enough. Over time, I found myself craving those small human interactions. A word here, a smile there. It reminded me I wasn't invisible, even if I wanted to be. At night, though, the shadows returned. I'd lie awake, replaying it all. I'd think about the house I'd left behind, about how she was probably wearing my ring while texting him, about how my name was buried under paperwork I didn't sign, debts I didn't choose. The worst was the photographs. In my mind, they haunted me. The picture of us on our wedding day, me in a suit that didn't quite fit, her smiling like she already knew she owned me. The photo of us with Mark at the lake, beers in our hands, all of us pretending we were brothers. Every memory felt poisoned now, as though someone had taken a match to the past and left nothing but ashes. One evening, when the silence in the motel room became unbearable, I walked to the gas station across the street. I bought a cheap notebook and a pen. Back in the room, I began to write. Not poetry, not stories, just fragments. Thoughts I couldn't carry in my head anymore. I am a man erased. She used my trust like kindling. My name is a debt I never made. The words poured out of me like blood from an open wound, and slowly, very slowly, I felt lighter. Walter noticed. He asked one day if I was finding my feet. I shrugged. He nodded, as though that was enough. I started helping him sometimes. Small things. Carrying boxes, holding a flashlight while he worked on an engine. Manual labor became its own therapy. My hands, which had once been used to hold hers, now carried weight, turned bolts, lifted things that needed lifting. There was something holy about sweat, about doing work that expected nothing from you except presence. Weeks turned into months. I wasn't healed, not yet, but I was different. I no longer checked my phone expecting her apology. I no longer woke up hoping it was all a dream. Instead, I woke up with a new thought. Maybe I can start again. The watch on my wrist ticked steadily. It didn't care about betrayal or debt. It simply kept moving forward. That became my lesson. Still, there was unfinished business. Every time I thought of going back, of confronting her, my stomach knotted. But the seed was planted. A man cannot live forever in hiding. The proof would come. The reckoning would come. But for now, I allowed myself the smallest grace, survival. And survival, I learned, is its own kind of victory. I never thought silence could be so heavy. The first weeks after my escape had been filled with noise, sirens in my skull, replayed arguments, imagined scenarios where I screamed back at her, where I told Daniel exactly what he was, where I got the justice that had been stolen from me. But silence. Silence was a different kind of enemy. It settled into the corners of my small rented room like dust, clung to my clothes, pressed down on my lungs at night. And yet, it was in that silence where I started to rebuild. Every morning I woke up at 5. Not because I wanted to, but because my body didn't know how to rest anymore. I'd sit by the narrow window, the one with chipped white paint, holding a cup of bitter instant coffee. I watched the world stir awake, the bakery down the street pulling up its shutters, the garbage truck groaning, an old man walking his dog with the same weary gait each morning. And for the first time in years, I had no one expecting anything from me. No chores to be scolded for missing. No accounts to be balanced for someone else's shopping spree. No borrowed money used to prop up someone else's dreams. Just me. I started carrying a notebook, a cheap spiral-bound one from the corner shop. I wrote down everything I remembered, every date, every transaction, every lie she had told with a straight face. I wrote about the cologne, too, how she said it lingered too long in the hallway when I came home from late shifts. That bottle became a symbol, a reminder of how small details can tell the truth louder than words. I wrote about Daniel, how he had once sat across from me in my living room, my wife bringing him whiskey as if he lived there, his laughter too comfortable. I replayed moments when his eyes lingered on her, and I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. But mostly, I wrote about myself, or rather, the man I used to be, the one who carried burdens without complaint, the one who thought loyalty meant enduring silence. That man had been destroyed. What remained was someone quieter, sharper, dangerous in a way I didn't fully understand yet. The silence became training. I picked up work at a small mechanics shop on the edge of town. The owner, a wiry man named Jorge, didn't ask questions. He saw the way I worked, methodical, careful, almost obsessively precise. He told me once, "You're fixing more than cars here, aren't you?" I just smiled. But he was right. Each engine I rebuilt was a metaphor for myself. Disassembled, examined, cleaned, put back together with stronger parts. The nights were the hardest. Memories returned then, uninvited. Her voice calling me too soft. Daniel's hand clapping my back like a brother while already planning his betrayal. My mother's eyes when I had to tell her the house I promised to save was gone. One night, I couldn't sleep, so I dug out my old phone. I still had access to our shared cloud drive. She never bothered to change the passwords, and that was when I found it. Recordings. Not ones I had made. Ones she must have forgotten synced automatically. Her voice, low and cruel, speaking to Daniel. He won't fight back. He never does. That's why it works. He's predictable. My hands trembled as I pressed replay. Over and over. It was proof. Not the kind that could undo the loan immediately. Not yet. But enough to expose the rot in their relationship. Enough to show the world what they really thought of me. The next day, I bought a small voice recorder. It felt strange, slipping it into my jacket pocket before work. But I realized I was no longer just surviving. I was preparing. Preparing for a moment when silence would no longer be enough. Weeks turned into months. I saved money. I rebuilt my credit little by little, not because I wanted to stay in the same system they had used to break me, but because it gave me control again. I reached out to an old college friend who now worked as a lawyer. Carefully, without giving away too much, I asked about cases like mine, about fraud, about identity theft. The world began to shift in small ways. One evening as I walked home, I passed a pawn shop. In the window, among watches and guitars, there was a simple silver ring. Not a wedding band. It wasn't that kind of ring. But it stopped me cold. It reminded me of the day I'd slid one onto her finger, believing it was a symbol of permanence. My ring was gone now, probably tucked away in some drawer she shared with him. But this one was mine to choose, mine to define. I bought it, slipped it on my own finger. Not as a vow to anyone else, but to myself. A reminder. Never again. It was around that time I started recording myself too. Notes to the man I was becoming. Remember this silence, I'd whisper. Remember what it felt like to be emptied out, so that when you're full again, you won't take it for granted. The power shift wasn't loud. It didn't come with fireworks or grand declarations. It came slowly, like dawn creeping through blinds. The moment I realized I could breathe without her name in my chest. The moment I realized Daniel's betrayal no longer kept me awake. The moment I saw her not as a force that defined me, but as a wound that was already scarring over. But there was still one thing left. Closure. One recorded call could make everything collapse. That was what I began to understand. Not just hers, not just his, but the ones I now had, stored carefully on a hidden drive. Pieces of their mockery. Proof of their theft. The very weapons they used to keep me small now turned back on them. I wasn't ready yet, but the seed had sprouted. And as I walked to work the next morning, the silver ring cool against my skin, I realized something profound. Silence is only heavy when you're carrying it alone. When you turn it into preparation, into a weapon, it becomes lighter. Soon, I would break it. I didn't go looking for revenge. At least not at first. For months, I lived in the quiet rhythm of my rebirth, working, saving, building a life that was mine alone. But the truth has a way of pacing at the edge of your conscience like a restless wolf. No matter how much distance I put between myself and the wreckage, I knew the day would come when I'd have to face them. Not for her. Not even for Mark. But for me. For the man who once looked in the mirror and saw nothing but a hollow reflection. For the man who sat staring at a pawned watch, fingers trembling, wondering if he had any worth left at all. I deserved closure. It started with the loan. Mark's loan. My name. Her signature. The one lie that tangled everything together. I spent weeks quietly pulling records, every lunch break a different courthouse, every evening a different file request. My hands shook the first time I held the folder, a thin stack of papers that somehow carried the weight of every sleepless night, every broken promise. There it was. Her handwriting forged, my name attached, his account number scribbled like graffiti across my life, and tucked inside, phone records, conversations between them. That's when I knew. The call would be the weapon. I staged it carefully. By then, I'd rebuilt a small office above the carpentry shop where I worked. 4 walls, a desk scarred with sawdust, and the hum of a cheap tape recorder waiting like a coiled spring. I dialed Mark first. His voice cracked with the false warmth of a man too used to smiling through lies. "Hey, man. Been a while." It was strange. How familiar his voice still felt. Like hearing an old song that used to be your favorite, before it got tied to a memory you'd rather burn. I played casual, like the fool they thought I still was. Asked about the loan, asked about the money, asked if he ever worried someone might find out. There was a pause. Then he laughed. "Find out? Come on, she handled everything. Smart girl. Said you'd never notice. Said you were too busy building shelves and chasing overtime to look up." Every word was a blade pressed deeper into the scar. And then came the slip. Mark lowered his voice, smug. "She said if anyone asked, she'd make it look like you signed. Said you'd take the fall before you'd ever blame her. She knew how much you loved her, man." I let the silence stretch, let him hang himself with his own words. And all the while, the recorder whirred softly on the desk. The second call was to her, my wife, the woman I once trusted more than the ground beneath my feet. Her tone was sharper, guarded. "Why are you calling me?" I let my voice crack, just enough to bait the hook. "I just need to hear it. From you. About the loan. About Mark." There was a long, weighted silence. Then a sigh. "You were never supposed to know. You'd never understand. Mark needed help and you wouldn't have agreed. You never saw the bigger picture." Bigger picture. The words echoed like poison. I pressed her, asked why she forged my name, asked why she thought I wouldn't notice. Her voice hardened. "Because you never notice anything. Because you loved me too much to see me for who I am. I knew you'd take the blame if it came to it. You always did." Click. The recorder captured it all. Confrontation Day wasn't dramatic, not in the way movies make it out to be. It was quieter, colder. I chose the lawyer's office, neutral ground. My wife sat across from me, eyes darting, lips pursed. Mark leaned back in his chair, all false confidence and cheap cologne, the same scent that once clung to my jacket when I thought it was hers. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I slid the recorder across the table. Pressed play. The office filled with their voices, Mark bragging, her confessing, every syllable echoing like a church bell announcing judgment. She paled first, hands tightening around the strap of her purse, knuckles white. Mark's smirk faltered, then collapsed altogether. I watched them unravel, their lies folding in on themselves, and for the first time in years, I felt steady. When the recording ended, I leaned back, quiet, still. "This," I said softly, "is the moment everything collapses." The legal fallout was immediate. Fraud charges, debt reassigned. My name cleared, my record unchained from their recklessness. But the true resolution wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the silence after. In the way Mark avoided my eyes when the lawyers read the charges. In the way she whispered my name, not with love, not with anger, but with fear. I didn't answer her. Not then. Not ever again. Walking out of that office felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. I reached into my pocket, fingers brushing against the watch I'd once pawned, now bought back with my own money. Its tick was steady, unbroken, a rhythm that matched the beat of my own heart. Time, once stolen from me, was mine again. Closure isn't loud. It isn't triumphant. It's the quiet knowing that you survived, that the people who tried to break you never held the power they thought they did. As I walked away from the wreckage, I thought about that ring I once twisted on my finger, the cologne that clung to my clothes, the framed photo that shattered on my living room floor. Symbols of a life that wasn't truly mine. Now, I carried new symbols. The call that ended everything. The watch that kept perfect time. The silence of peace, deeper than any apology they could have offered. I wasn't the man who loved blindly anymore. I wasn't the fool who signed everything away. I was the man who stood back up. The man who walked away. The man who finally understood that survival is the most beautiful kind of revenge.